and ever. There's usually term limits. There are still some nonprofits out there that may not have term limits in place. I would say that if I were you, that's a good question to ask when you're researching about being on a board and you're thinking about it. It's a good question to say, you know, do you have term limits, or is this a lifetime sentence? Because you certainly don't want to be on there for 100 years. You know, that it's good to have turnover so that you get fresh perspective. Just a shout out, or if you want to do the reaction thing, how many of you are actually already on boards and you're just taking this as a sort of something just to get under your belt and a refresh? Like I said, sometimes I can't see everybody's reactions, but if you're already on a board and you know some of this stuff, I hope you'll ask questions that may have come up, you know, while you've already been serving on a board, or maybe some of these things will answer that question for you. One thing I wanted to point out is that we don't want to confuse governance for management. And that has happened before. I've even been on some boards where the board has gotten a little too far into the weeds of the day-to-day operations. And you want to remember that the board of directors is the high level where you're thinking of the strategy, the oversight, accountability. It's more of the big picture, you know, where do we want to go in 5 years and 10, that kind of thing. And management is more of the day-to-day operations of a nonprofit. And that's where your staff come in, and they know the day-to-day stuff, and you're there in case there's, of course, a problem with the day-to-day stuff, but you're mostly there to just oversee that and be that higher level to keep things going. You should focus on the mission, the strategy, and the goals. That's why we have board retreats, so that you can think outside of those day-to-day fires that nonprofits are usually having to put out. And then you think of the staff members as the ones that are responsible for the implementation of the mission, and that's making it happen and actually serving the people. So that's just something to remember. Now, I will insert here that I actually am working with 2 different nonprofits right now, or have worked with, that actually are having a time where the board is actually having to be a working board. They've had staff turnover in the executive director position that has happened over the last couple of years, and they haven't filled that position yet for one reason or another. They feel like they need to get their ducks in a row before they put the job description out. They're trying to rethink kind of what direction they're going to go. And both of them have boards right now that are actually, the board president is serving as somewhat of an executive director. And that does happen from time to time. So when I say this about don't confuse government versus management, just remember there are situations where unforeseen circumstances come up and you've got things happening, and next thing you know, the board is actually having to do some of the work. So both of those organizations, one of them have no staff. They just had 1 staff on this particular nonprofit. And so the board president and the vice president are keeping things running. And on the other one, they have a program officer that's still working and still doing the mission and making it happen, but they don't have an executive director. So that board president and that board are stepping in and filling some of those roles. So that does happen. And I just, wanted to make sure you know that every once in a while you might be on a board that goes down a path where something happens and you actually have to keep the nonprofit in the day-to-day portion too. But for the most part, you're the governance and the strategic part of the mission. Most boards are made up of officers, so we have a roll of officers. They're typically chosen from the board members, and they get, they have a higher sense or a higher level of responsibility compared to the other board members. And They usually serve terms. You don't want to have a president for 7 years. That's not usually how it's done. There needs to be turnover, and in the same, like board members, there needs to be turnover in the officer positions too. Usually there are job descriptions, and the officer roles and their terms should be specifically defined in the bylaws. And that's another thing. Bylaws are not the most exciting thing to read, but in my early days, we had one board member who was an attorney, and whenever a board member would come up with an idea, or we'd get off, target or track of the agenda in board meeting, he would always say, well, let's check the bylaws. And not everybody has that mentality. So a little hint to, usually when you join a board, you should get a copy of the bylaws. And if you're not offered it in orientation, or if you're not offered an orientation, those are some of the questions you should write down, right now. If you join a board, it's good to ask, is there an orientation, a board member orientation? Are there term limits? And then the third thing that I was just thinking of is the bylaws. No, you're probably not going to read those word for word, but it's always good for the organization to give that packet of information out. Another thing to look for is a sample or an actual job description of what they expect from you as a board member, and most nonprofits have that. So those are some things that you should ask when you join a board, and know what you're specifically being asked to do. And then if you're elected secretary or treasurer, ask if there is a job description for those jobs as well. Usually the role of the officers, or the officers that are on the board, are the president, secretary, and treasurer. Now, in the roles or the boards that I've been a part of, or in the organization I was a part of, we also had the vice president or vice chairman was also one of those board positions, because you want that person that's about to take the reins to be involved in the meetings as well. And then also sometimes a past president can be one of the officers and do some of the tasks that there's some great jobs for the past president to do, so that they're there for continuity of what just happened that year, and they can help the new president along the way. Now, I did find this tidbit in my research that the president cannot serve as the secretary, which is prohibited in most states, and it's defined by nonprofit corporate law, which you might find out in ethics in your next session. But a president cannot serve as the secretary. There are times when the president might have to be, another office, but it really is best practices not to have someone serve 2 offices. And I think y'all know this. This is pretty basic stuff, but I just wanted to say that. But if there was ever a president that wanted to be secretary, it's probably not legal. So if you get into a situation and you see that, you need to raise your hand and say, we need to check this out. Who makes a great board member? So there are lots of things we could talk about here, and especially with my fundraising background, there are so many things. And I get the opportunity to speak to y'all again in October on the fundraising session, and so we'll probably talk about this even more in depth. But most anybody can become a board member. So if someone wants to serve and wants to be a part of a board, usually that's about all you need. But you want to find individuals within the community who have a passion and have experience that aligns with what the nonprofit needs. So I say this all the time. I want people, or as a person that works with nonprofits, you want everything to line up and have that passion and that commitment. If it's something you're not really into, you're not going to give it the amount of time, probably, because you're not ever going to get into it unless you hear about it and you're immediately sold and want to get to be a part of it and want to learn more. That's different. But if there's something you're really passionate about, you're probably going to be a better board member on that organization's board than if you just joined the board because I need to get boards on my resume. Organizations want to choose board members who have some experience in a range of fields and expertise. And I'm going to talk here a little bit about a lot of boards have board matrix, a board matrix. And so, a while ago when I said that we had an attorney on the board that just so happened to always remember the bylaws when someone had a crazy idea, it's good to look at a board makeup and think, what is my expertise that I can offer? So the boards that I serve on right now, I'm tending to help with some fundraising strategies because that's my background, and just some nonprofit practices because that's my background. But if you are an attorney, or if you are a CPA, or if you are a marketing person, what your background is, sometimes that's exactly what the board needs, because it gives them an extra set of mentors to mentor the staff and the organization to continue the mission and take it to the next level. So if there's an expertise you have, 9 times out of 10, there's a board that needs someone from your field. And if they already have that slot filled right now, they're going to have you on a short list for when term limits expire and it's time to rotate who's on the board. And you need to make sure that they remember that you're ready to serve when that field is needed. So just remember, you have a gift that you can give, and finding out, if your background is HR, you wouldn't believe the nonprofit organizations that just need someone to bounce ideas off that has an HR background. I mean, it's so helpful. Conflict of interest. That I'm just going to touch on this because I have a feeling this will be in your next session. But this is, I know you've heard this term before. You don't want to serve on a board if you have a conflict of interest somehow. You're the person that this organization is using as a contract or in business with. It's probably not a good idea for you to serve on the board. If you're related to someone on the board, it's probably not good to be on the board, like husband and wives or spouses or brothers and sisters. Although it'd be great fun to be on a board together, usually it's better not to be on the board with someone you're related to. If you're related to someone that works for the organization, that can be a conflict of interest. If you're an employee, you really shouldn't be on the board. The executive director and the development director probably attend meetings and have lots of input in board meeting and have relationships with the board members, but usually they are non-voting parts of the board. And so if there is a situation that you get into and you find out the executive director also has a voting part of the board, that's something to maybe look into, because most of the time the executive director is there to report and share what's happening, but give the opinion of how that would benefit or hurt the organization, but not someone that actually has an actual vote on the board. If you're a part of a transaction involving board members or employees, sometimes that's one of those wishy-washy things you really don't want to be a part of. A great example is if the organization has done a great job of fundraising and say they have an interest account or an endowment account, you probably don't want a board member that is managing those funds. That would be a conflict. On the board on the organization I was involved in, our board member that ended up managing our funds later down the road, he wasn't a board member anymore, but we knew he was familiar with the organization being past board service, and then he became an ex officio board member, sort of an advisor, and never was a voting member of the board, to keep that clean. And then sometimes sometimes you'll find that there's a hard way to avoid a conflict of interest. Sometimes the founder of an organization might also be starting the board as well, and they might not understand that they can't be a voting member, but at that time it's so grassroots, they're needed to be a voter or something. There are just things that come up, but it's really the best practice to avoid conflict of interest. If you are in a situation and there is a conflict of interest and it has been pointed out, the best thing you can do is document everything that is connected to, that would shine a light on that conflict of interest. Any decision making should be documented. Proper documentation helps the organization ensure that all the meetings have proper board members to satisfy the quorum. Policies, procedures, just make sure you make excellent notes and cover your bases, and make, you as a new board member, make sure that you're saying, are we getting all this down, so that we make sure and outline why we have this possible conflict of interest. So now we're to the part of why are some of the reasons you guys want to serve on a nonprofit board. And so I'm going to stop share for just a second, if that, I don't know if that, but let's talk about, just shout out some answers as to why you want to serve on boards. What are some reasons that people decide they want to be on a board?
The cause that the nonprofit supports is important to them.
Yes, that's the best one. What are some other reasons? And they can be bad reasons too.
Yeah, if you have a passion maybe for the organization, if you just want to be of service, you want to contribute to your community and offer yourself to others and kind of have that heart, I think that's a big reason why I want to serve for
Yes.
other organizations.
Yes.
To
Yes.
be a part of the decision-making process and establishing the strategy of the organization.
Very good. Very good. Is there anybody out here that wants to be the bylaws police and just loves to read bylaws? That's why they want to be on a board?
No, but you did mention one during your presentation about people that just want something to put onto their resume.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it is helpful to show that you're involved in the community. It really is on a resume. So it's not a bad thing, but I think if you can match it to a passion, that makes it like top notch, even better.
Hey, Allison, and for you, maybe Ross as well, are these sessions, and forgive me if I didn't read this carefully, or mostly focused around nonprofit boards or corporate boards as well?
I assumed that it was a lot of nonprofit, but I'm sure that there'll be some that talk in like the next session. There'll probably be some about corporate boards as well.
So the main focus is kind of nonprofits, but we will, as we get a little bit deeper, we'll start to cover a little bit more of the corporate boards as well. So it's kind of a mixture, but very heavily focused on nonprofit and board service through the nonprofit realm, and plus through the civic realm as well. So within your city, board service there as well.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that helps with the expectations.
Yeah, and the thing is we need you. There are so many nonprofits in Northwest Arkansas, and we're looking for a fresh perspective and all ages and backgrounds and ethnicity. That's what we need. So when Emerging Leaders puts this on, it's such a great thing when we know there's people that are actually trying to learn what is it about being on a board, and we can plug them into more organizations. So that is, the nonprofit is kind of the focus right now. And you're needed. Just remember, you're needed. We're always needing someone. Let me see if I can. There we go. Here are some not so solid reasons to join a board. A friend asked you and you feel you can't say no. Your company is pressuring staff to serve on boards and you feel you must do so to keep your job. Now, that is a not so solid reason, but let me tell you, that happens. I've heard that before, that your boss says, hey, you need to get involved and we need you to make sure you're over there because so-and-so's on the board and we need to get to know them better. There are all those things that happen. What would be really great is if we could go back to what we just said, if you could find a board that you're passionate about and be doing it because your job wants you to get more involved, but also something that you're passionate about and you're wanting to learn about. That's always a win-win situation. If you make a contribution to a nonprofit and now you want to make sure you have a say in how they spend the money, that is a not so solid reason to join a board. And that's back to that governance versus day-to-day management. If you feel guilty because you've not given enough to your community, that's not a solid reason to join the board, but guess what? We'll take it. If you want to give to your community, it just goes back to aligning with something you're really passionate about. You're going to be a better board member if you're really passionate about serving in something that's touched your family or touched your life, or you remember a friend from high school that went through an illness and now you find out that they've got a local chapter and you want to get involved. That's the reason to join a board. It's not if you're lonely and need a new activity to get out of the doldrums. I haven't heard the word doldrums in a while, but I think COVID is a great time to bring up the word doldrums. We've all kind of been in the doldrums, but it's not the only reason to join a board. Steps in becoming a board member. Let me make sure we're doing good on time. This is just exactly what we've been talking about, is identify an organization you're interested in serving. You want to align with a mission that lights your fire and gives you that fire in your belly. We've seen a lot of things happen in COVID that have been really good. We knew that our health care workers were working, just these crazy hours and they weren't getting any sleep, and all these things were happening. So people started bringing meals and doing all these things for Mercy or, the hospitals in the area to take care of our healthcare workers. If that's something that struck you, well, you can keep doing that and maybe find out about how getting on a board for, the Mercy organization, or something with NWAC and their nursing students. You can find a way, something that really lights your fire and makes you passionate and you want to make change. Or if there's something you're angry about and you really are sick and tired of the underdog always being under. And so find the organization that aligns with that, where you can feel you're making a difference and you're actually helping to make the thing that you think is so wrong. Join that board that you want to make it right. And the first thing you do is, after you go through that process of figuring out, how do I want to serve? How much time do I want to give? Then you start contacting these organizations. And the thing with this group, you're going through this right now, these sessions for board service, you can all help each other. And I think in the past, what Emerging Leaders did that was really good is, after people completed this program, they made the list of your names and contact information. They made it available to the nonprofits so that they could even contact you. But what would be really great is if you contact the organization or reach out to your fellow Emerging Leaders class members and say, have you gotten connected yet? Because I'm looking for this. Have you seen anything out there? Or anybody could contact me. I work with a lot of nonprofits, and I would be glad to help match you up with something you're passionate about. But a lot of times, the nonprofit is searching for the board members. And it's always great when we have somebody come to us and say, oh man, I just really want to get involved. And one thing that I lean toward is, it'd be a great thing to get involved on a committee, or if they have, a lot of nonprofits have special committees, like their fundraising gala or their annual giving drive, or they might have, they have committees that are filled by people from the community that aren't necessarily on the board. And it's a great way for you to see if it's a good fit. So if you've been going to the, I'm just going to make up something, the garden party for the Healing Gardens every year for 5 years, and you're very passionate about that organization, what a great place to get started is to say, I would love to be on the garden party committee. Is there some way I can serve in that? And then once you do that for, a little bit, then you're meeting other people who are passionate about it. You're probably going to get to meet board members. And then if you feel good, like this is a good fit, I'm really enjoying this and I want to do more, then you can say, I'd really love to serve on the board. Now, sometimes you go right to the board and that's fine. You can do that. Contact the organization and say, I'm interested in serving on the board. And if there's not a position, I would love to serve on a committee. Give them your information and then talk to them a little bit about the expectations. They could even show you the board job description early on and say, do you think you have this amount of time? You just want to be clear about all that stuff. But that's the greatest thing, is to reach out first and, try to find that good match. And if you right now feel a little bit intimidated about joining a board first thing, the best way to get involved, and the chamber is a perfect example. You're involved in Emerging Leaders right now, but then also there are so many committees at the chamber that tie into some of our nonprofits in the community. If you have a passion for education, there's a ton of things the chamber's doing for teachers or for scholarships or for the public schools, that you could get involved on one of those committees and start serving there. And that leads to an introduction to some nonprofits out in the community. And that's one of the ways I got started years ago. I've been a part of the chamber for 25 years. And I was on like a greeting committee for Business After Hours. I was an ambassador. I was a board member. I was on there was a community recognition committee at that time. I don't know if they have that anymore, but I know there's a small business committee or group. There are so many ways to get involved with the chamber that will lead you to meeting people and networking, which will then lead you to some more nonprofits and board services. And then you can always Google, but it's so good when you meet someone and you get to know them, it's more comfortable to then join the board. And then understanding the expectations is always good. You just want to know what you want to know what they're expecting from you before you get involved, so that you're not they're not disappointed that you're not able to give as much as they thought, and you're not disappointed that I really thought I would be doing more, and they only meet once a quarter and there's really not much we do, so it's good to understand those expectations. Let's see. There was one other thing. There are ways to reach out to other board members too, especially if you know someone on the board. It's a great way to go have coffee with them and just see if they think you would be a good fit as well. A lot of times that's really how it happens. The nominating committee, they reach out to who they know and who they think might be interested. So remember, just the more networking you can do can lead to some of these. You want to ask a lot of questions about the mission. You don't have to get down into the weeds, but ask about financial stability. If you definitely want to know if there's been some problems or issues, what you're getting yourself into. If things aren't good right now, you want to know that before you join. If they're not good and you want to get in there and roll up your sleeves and help, then man, that's a great thing. But if things aren't good and it really gives you an uneasy feeling, it gives you a chance to decline gracefully and say, at this time, I don't think it's a good fit right now. And you want to be a part of an organization that has a well-planned recruitment process. It's a two-way street. So, just like we've been saying, you want to fulfill the role that they need you to fill, but you also need the mission and the vision and the organization to fill a role that you have too and be what you're looking for. And effective boards are composed mostly of skills, talents, backgrounds, perspectives, all those things. And that's what you want to be, an effective board. So after all this sharing and information and feeling out if that's something you want to do, so that's when the organization starts telling you, this is when we usually, July is the month we usually start, or January 1 is when we start those board terms. So it's not easy to find board members. It's a hard thing. So I will tell you, this session and all of these sessions through Emerging Leaders are so helpful, because it'll help you be more savvy when you're trying to find where you want to serve. So it gives you stuff to look forward to, so that you're prepared, they're prepared. And I think we already talked about the gifts you have and the roles you serve in your job and in your career. Those are the types of things that nonprofit boards need, and even corporate boards too. Okay, so this is where I like to take just a little bit. We've got about 5 minutes before question time. And honestly, just take a minute. We're going to get quiet for a second and write down some of the, what gets you fired up to want to serve. We're going to take just 2 or 3 minutes, to literally write down, are there, 3 or 4 things? Like, are you one that wants to raise money for cancer research? Are you one that cares so much about stray dogs and cats? Are you one that cares about ocean pollution and cleanup of the ocean, climate change, the women's shelter, the crisis center, suicide prevention? What is the thing that fires you up? So I'm going to be quiet for a second, but I want you to take this time and literally try to write down 3 or 4 things that touch your heart and really inspire you, or something that's affected your family or your inner circle, and you want to roll your sleeves up and change or raise awareness. Ready, set, go. And if you want to even put some in the chat room, you totally can. In the chat, you can put some.
I know everyone's thinking of what they're putting in, but I do see a couple questions in the chat and just want to answer. So Allison kind of touched on one thing that we try to do with Northwest Arkansas Emerging Leaders is connect people to board service opportunities. So I do keep a running list of nonprofits in the area who need help right now. And as a part of this group, I will add your guys' name to a separate list of people who have attended this board service certification who have a need to serve. And then whenever those openings come up, I email that list out to the group. And so then you're now aware of the opportunities that are out there. So we're trying to make those connections happen. So that's something that we still do, because we do need people to serve. We need diverse representation on those boards as well. So we're thinking of everybody in the community, not just one group. So that is something that we do here. Still try to get people plugged in and make those connections for you. So we try to make it as easy as possible for you guys attending this class.
That's great. I saw Sam had a question up there. He's new to the community, and y'all, some others may have this too, and you want to be a part of something, but you haven't gone to any of the events or anything yet, Sam, I think it's a great idea. Start attending events. If you see them on Facebook, sign up and go to events with friends to see if that's something you want to be a part of. And then if it really, really piques your interest and you think, man, I really want to get involved in this, I think that night, if there's a card on the table where you make your donation, also write, I want to get more involved. Please contact me so we can visit about it. And they should contact you. And if they don't, because sometimes things happen after an event, put on your calendar to call them in a couple of weeks after the event's over and tell them you'd like to talk to them about. But going to the events is a great way to get involved and see if it's a good feel, and if the mission's what you, by the name of the event and the organization, is the mission what you thought it was. The event is a great place to hear the story, and if you are moved to make a donation that night, then to me that says you want to get involved. So is everybody? Some people put some of their passions in the chat, so be sure and look at that. Oh yeah, this one's really good. This is really good. There's a lot going on right now with the LGBTQ community. Cecil says he grew up in Springdale, so he has a lot of passion to help Hispanic, Marshallese communities, Black Lives Matter, all those things. And right now, that's what people need. And yes, Cecil, I'm glad you got what I said. Some things happen after an event. Yeah. The event is so crazy, but don't hold it against the staff if you don't hear from them right away, because sometimes, that stack of cards ends up in a board member's back seat and we don't get them back for 2 weeks, or, so-and-so put them at the bottom of the box and we haven't found that yet. So just know that you can be persistent and call them again and say, I really want to serve. But, here's one. I'm passionate about assisting small businesses and women. So I think, talk to Ross about that small business. I think there's still a small business committee or small business coalition at the chamber. You should get involved in that and be the one that says, I'd like to have a special emphasis on the women-owned businesses in Northwest Arkansas, and be a liaison for them and get involved that way. But this is what you can do, is you've made this list now. And so as you go about your weekend and, on to the next session, you can be kind of, thinking about, what events do I need to sign up for? Who is it that serves on that golf committee that I've never even thought about being a part of that? I should do that. Or, what is it? I don't know anyone at organization ABC that I'm interested in. How am I going to get connected? And that's where Ross or myself, I'm glad to help anyone get connected to any of these nonprofits. There's also, if you think about it, there's Rotary, Kiwanis, the Association of Fundraising Professionals, Emerging Leaders. There's all these other kinds of nonprofit boards, civic boards, that you can serve on as well. I know Samuel, I see him, he's attending. Hi, Samuel. He's been just asked to help us on our Rotary board. And so there are opportunities everywhere you look. And so being a part of something different can lead to board positions that might not be the nonprofit you had in your head, but it's still a nonprofit and a way to serve, like a Rotary Club or the board for emerging leaders. Maybe, I don't know if there's still a board for that group, but that could be one where you get started. So let me go back to, I can't remember if I need to keep sharing my screen or not. I think, here we go. Yes, we're just at the questions, so I can stop sharing. Is there anything, I tried to make some notes so I wouldn't forget. But is there anything that y'all want to ask? You know, you've done such a great job in the chat over there, but this is a great time for discussion about if there's anything that you're thinking that I didn't cover. Please go ahead and let's have some discussion on. Feel free. Jump on out there. I will say this while we're waiting for somebody to unmute. I'm sure someone was just about to say something. You know, you'll probably get into this in the next session, but there are a lot, most boards, there's a liability insurance that comes with serving on a board. So I was a part of a board one time that there was a man that didn't want to join because he didn't like that because he would be on a board, he would be liable if there was a lawsuit or something. And I mean, I was so young at that time, I hadn't even thought about it. I was just ready to do, you know, ready to be a part of it, ready to help. I hadn't thought about any kind of liability or anything like that. And so I do know that most boards have there's policy and insurance that covers the board if something goes crossways. And, you know, we think it's never going to happen to us, but you know, you want to be prepared in case it does. So you are a lot of times covered with a liability insurance for the board if you know, to help ease your mind about joining.
Hey, Allison, this is Kara. I'll jump in with a question. Since it sounds like you've seen a lot of different compositions of boards with organizations,
Yes.
are there some things that you've seen that might be watch outs that make a good combination, or are there places where there are where it's common that there's a mismatch of expectations between board members and the organization?
Yeah.
What are some of those
Oh,
things?
yes, we've seen some of that. One little thing that the first thing I thought of when you said that is when something gets off balance. There's two examples where I worked. I was at Open Avenues, which used to be Adult Development Center years ago, and we had two different boards. We had a foundation board and we had an organizational board. And early on, the nominations committee was, I don't know how it happened, except that, you know, how you ask the people you know to be on the board. And we looked up one day and we realized that most of the people on the board were from the same Church of Christ. And then we realized the nominating committee was the preacher at that Church of Christ. And so it wasn't a bad thing. They were all wonderful people and everybody gelled really well. But it was like, okay, we've got 11 board members of the same church. And so we realized then that the nominating chairperson needed to change or have more people on his committee because we just ended up with all these people. And it wasn't, like I said, there was not a bad thing. It never led to a conflict of interest. It was just one of those things that it's like, we probably should have thought that through. But you ask someone, we needed board members, you ask the people you know, and they say yes, and they get excited, and it brought new people to our mission and that had never even heard of us. And, you know, and so we were excited to get to know them, but then we realized we kind of got lopsided. Another example, and you know, Walmart is my favorite thing in the whole world. My husband works for Walmart. Northwest Arkansas is Walmart. You know, we bleed blue, and we are the spark or whatever. There are times when you can get too many people from Walmart on the board. And I know y'all have probably heard that. Half of you probably work for Walmart, and just so that's wonderful. But and the same thing with our suppliers. We don't want to have all suppliers on a board and all Walmart on the board, or half Walmart and half suppliers. It needs to be, and that's why those matrix forms are so important for board members to go through. And I think after that Church of Christ situation, and then there was a time where we had so many Walmart people that we had to remind them that we were a nonprofit. We didn't quite run like Walmart. And so it's hard when you've got so many people that think in Walmart terms or think in, so those were the two where we got a little lopsided. So we developed the board, our board matrix, and they're out there. You can Google them. You can get a version of them where you find out, so the organization I was on was job training for adults with disabilities. So on the organizational board, they had to have some representation from the client side or the families that we served. So we had to have 2 board positions on that board that were served by someone whose family member was a participant in Open Avenues. We had to have that, and then we tried to use our matrix. We need someone that has a legal background. We need someone with HR. We need a marketing. We need, and once, it wasn't always perfect, but it certainly helped us to make sure we weren't just, we didn't have 5 people with marketing background and no one with a financial background. You want that CPA on there they don't always have to be the treasurer, but they're really good treasurers. But you want that CPA person so that they can, when it's budget time, the executive director can say, I've got it all worked out. Do you have any ideas on this one part? I'm just struggling here. And they can come up with different ideas. It doesn't mean hijack the nonprofit's budget and take it over because you're a CPA. It just means you can mentor and serve as, here's a really smart way we could cut, or here's a really smart way we could reallocate this so that you can use it for that. And, you just want those board matrices. They help keep the board strong and balanced. And that's what you want, is balance. Any other questions? That was a great one.
Allison, you did a great job talking here about the matrix, and also that was a great example of actually having representation from the people that you serve. I just completed the Executive Master's Program with the Clinton School, and one of the issues that's very passionate for me is having diverse representation. And when I say that, I really mean especially in race, especially low income, in the environmental sector. And when I approached my former employer about getting more diverse representation on the board, I was told, well, the board chooses the board and I can't tell the board who they should and shouldn't choose. Can you just talk about, do you have an example of successful boards that maybe have expanded, maybe don't have, that the whole board isn't made up of rich men, as my board was, and maybe does have more representation from the community, racially, economically, education?
Angela, I appreciate it so much. It's such a touchy subject, but it's very, especially right now in the times we're in, diversity has been the buzzword for how many years? And I think now we are finally seeing that we've got to be more diligent, and honestly, it's a part of the matrix as well. It really is. Trying to think outside of our cookie cutter, what's always been. We've got to think outside that. And I'm finding there are more resources now to reach some of the diverse population. And when I say diverse, it's not necessarily about the color of someone's skin. It's the ages. We can get into a thing where we have all white women in their 40s. Well, they have one thing that they're focused on, and wouldn't it be great if we had someone in their late 20s and we had someone that's in their 60s? And it covers such a large thing, and that matrix needs to be a part of that too. And as you're asking this question of me, when you begin to start interviewing different organizations you're wanting to be a part of, you should definitely, these are the kind of questions you need to ask. How are you on diversity? I know that in my experience, we had a hard time with this question or with this opportunity because we hadn't delved into reaching out to different ethnicities to get on the board, and we had clients that needed to be represented because they were from different backgrounds. So it is something that you and your experience and what you've just gone through to get your degree, you need to use that to ask the questions and think of ways to help boards that are still stuck in those ruts, because we get into ruts. I mean, we looked up and literally everyone was Church of Christ, and I was raised Church of Christ. And so, I mean, I was familiar with that religion, but I thought that it's just not, you don't want to do that. You want to create a path that you have representation from what your community or your program or your mission looks like. So thank you for speaking up, and that is part of that matrix. How are we, Ross? It looks like we got 2 minutes, so maybe one more question.
Yeah, we have 2 minutes, so if anybody has a final question, I mean, this is some great conversations. So if anybody has one more question, I think we got time for it.
Hi, this is Wendy, and
Hi,
I would
Wendy.
love to hear, hello, I would love to hear a little bit about the number of board members recommended on a board. We have a small board, and I visited with someone, and he had said it's always better to have like 5 or 7 or 9. Can you speak to that?
Yes,
Thank you.
I have found that when I started, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, that there were some boards that had like 20 or 25 board members. And I think when we officially started the Foundation Adult Development Center, I was starting their development program from scratch. And so we recruited like 18 board members, and we couldn't get everybody there at the same time. First of all, I feel like that's way too many. I think the sweet spot is around 9 to 11. I feel like it allows for the matrix to get several different, for you to fill several different positions. It also gives a bench for training for the officers. So for some reason, I always love the idea of the odd number because of voting. So I think 9 or 11. 5 or less kind of makes me nervous. It seems like it's not enough people to share. I'm sure they're doing a great job, but I would think you would want a little more depth with going up to 9 to 11. 7, probably would be okay. But I feel like the sweet spot's 9 or 11. 13, it would be okay, but I think anything above 13, you're getting into it's really hard to get everybody on the same page and get them to the meetings for quorum and all that. So that's my 2 cents. I think 9 to 11 is the sweet spot. 7 and 13 is kind of on the outskirts there. Did that answer that okay, Wendy?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
We are
All right.
We are right at 11 o'clock. So Allison, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you everybody for attending. Just some great conversations, a lot of good takeaways. Definitely excited about this program moving forward. Just remember, we'll be back here same time next Friday, 10 a.m. We'll be talking about the legal and ethics side of board service. So getting a little bit deeper into the weeds. So just looking forward to that conversation, everyone. I'll send out the link to that meeting on Wednesday or Thursday of next week. So check your emails from me. Allison, thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
I'll also wrap up this meeting. I'll send over some the PowerPoint, the matrix that Allison used today, and also there's some matrix that talk about how you can diversify your board. So I'll send that out to everyone as well. So thank you guys for coming today, and enjoy the rest of your day and happy weekend.
Thank you, and I'll see you all in October.
Bye. guys. Thank you so much.